the girl a-running in a group. She had a high-speed motor in a 40 Ford coupe. She had a racing cam and a supercharged. Look at Buddy, hot rod at large. She's a hot rod. She's a hot rod. She's my hot rod.
Hey, Big George and T-Rex, this is John from Avanti. How you doing today?
How you doing, John?
Hey, did you hear about new president at Ford Motor Company? What do you think about him?
Well, you know, it's going to be a different ball game, but did you see what they gave the old guy for leaving?
No.
$53.7 million or something like that. That was his going away.
I'd go away for that.
Yeah, I'd go away for the .7, John. And they didn't have to. They could have saved $53 million on me. I'd have gone away for the .7. That's crazy.
And to think they gave him that, and the reason they got rid of him is because the stock prices were going up, they were going down. This new guy, he was the head of the autonomous driving division of Ford, you know, the self-driving cars. So he's been with Ford. He just got moved over. And he used to work for Steelcase, you know, the office furniture company.
Oh, yeah.
And you see the semi-trailers with the nice rainbow paint job. Well, he went and joined Steelcase, and he shut down the operations in the United States and moved everything to Mexico.
Well, that's not going to happen anymore, John. Trust me. Those days are over. Those days are over.
Let's hope so.
We got a little more regulation
Hey,
now
George.
than that. Yeah,
Hey,
buddy.
George, do you watch the Indy 500 race?
I'm going to, yeah.
Do you remember back in like 66 or 67, Andy Granatelli with the turbine car that he entered?
Oh, yeah. I remember the first experimental Buick car. They had a Buick motor car back in the day, back in the 60s. The V6 Buick. You could hear the difference as it went around the track. It was a completely different sound.
Yeah. You know, and what I always liked was Andy Granatelli. He had that turbine engine car. And for people that don't know, usually like the Indy car, the driver sits like in the middle. For a while, they had engines in front of him. Now I think they're in back of him. Well, this engine was so big, this turbine engine was from a helicopter. They had to make the car almost like a two-seater. The driver was on the left hand, and the right-hand side was the engine went from almost the front to the back of the car. Anyhow, he was great. He entered the race, his own money, independent guy. This new technology, different than a piston engine. He runs it, and if I remember correctly, it was like the last 10 laps. He was leading every lap or pulling away. He was holding the lead or pulling away. Got down to like 5 laps to go and started losing speed. Ends up didn't win the race. It was some $20 bearing failed on the engine, and it made it so that the engine it didn't finish the race.
All right, and the next year they had rules against that engine.
Yeah. So that's what they do. You know, there's like, okay, Granatelli, you can spend your money and come and try and race against us, but if you're going to try and beat us, well, then we're going to outlaw you, and you can't do it. And that was really, you know, that's terrible, George. You know, imagine where that was like 40, 50 years ago. The technology that we could have had since then on a turbine engine that could run on any kind of fuel, you know. And
I got to tell you, John,
it
it's not going to be a couple more Memorial Days, and they're not going to have any drivers in these cars. They're going to drive themselves. What kind of race is that?
I know. It's just like big radio-controlled cars.
Absolutely. John, thanks for calling, buddy. You always make my Saturday. Good talking to you.
Happy Memorial Day.
You too, buddy. Happy motoring to you. I got to tell you, John from Avanti, he's a regular on our show lately, and he's a good man. He knows a lot about cars. Always been around a long time, too. Never met him, but I hope he's not as old as me. Wow. Just when you thought it was safe to quit talking about Dieselgate, I told you everything I needed to know last week. I told you about the diesels, and I told you they're going to go away, and people for some reason they can't make them pass the emission standards. They can't get them past the emission standards, so they stink up the air. Okay, more companies doing this, doing that, but Volkswagen was the first one to put what they call a defeat device in their computer. We're going to talk about that today again because of a reason. There's a company or there's a group that has found They dug it out. They went in there and pulled that cavity out of that tooth, and they found the defeat device. But before we do that, FCA Chrysler, the automobiles, they are proposing to fix 104,000 diesel engines that predicts they will resolve negotiations with the Justice Department and U.S. regulatory people over emission standards. Volkswagen is not the only one. Fiat Chrysler has got their hands full. They, too, could not make a diesel that passed emissions. Now, if you remember when they first caught Volkswagen said they would reprogram their cars and they would be fine. Well, they're not. They're stored everywhere. They're in the Pontiac Silverdome. They're at the Gary Airport. You got diesel Volkswagens everywhere because they're pulling them off the road. They're buying them back. They're storing them because they can't fix it. They can't make that diesel engine meet nitrous of oxide statistics or standards under load, under acceleration. They can't make that thing pass, okay? They just can't. And neither can Chrysler, apparently. And now Chrysler's trying to beg out because if it costs Chrysler what it costs Volkswagen, Chrysler will cease to exist. I guarantee you. Volkswagen is, thank God they were the biggest car company in the world and they had like $1 gazillion to play with, okay? The U.S. government has opened a lawsuit over Fiat Chrysler over excess emissions. Oh, here we go. German prosecutors have broken into and searched Daimler offices and factories, part of a fraud probe related to false advertising and possible manipulation of exhaust gas after treatment in their diesel cars. First of all, Chrysler said, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of these cars, and they're going to be nice and clean. 2 lies right off the bat. So Chrysler, well, bad news. You did it again, and guess what? You did it. Frankfurt, Germany. German prosecutors are investigating whether Daimler manipulated emission tests in its diesel cars. Can you say defeat device? And are looking at whether Robert Bosch, the company, was involved in the alleged fraud. This is an investigation into aiding and abetting fraud, said a spokesman for the Stuttgart prosecutor. Stuttgart, I always liked that. I always liked the name of that town, Stuttgart. The German newspaper Handelsblatt said that on Thursday. So, in other words, Mercedes, Daimler, and Bosch. Bosch is already under lawsuit in Germany because they claim that they made the defeat device for Volkswagen and put it in their little bitty computer. They make the computer. Okay? Well, they did. And guess what? Not to be outdone. And it's coming. They're all good. There isn't a car company going that has a diesel that meets emission standards. That's my prediction. You heard it here first on the Car Guy Show. I'm telling you they can't make these cars pass emissions. Not legally. They can cheat, they can lie, and they can steal. But they can't make them pass. Not legally. And guess who's involved now? General Motors is being accused in a lawsuit of using Volkswagen-type defeat devices. The automaker says it will vigorously defend itself. This goes back, 2015 is when Volkswagen first admitted, okay, and said that, hey, this is it. Well, people who own or lease 705,000 GM Duramax diesel trucks filed a lawsuit Thursday claiming General Motors installed multiple such devices in 2 models of heavy-duty trucks from 2011 to 2016. General Motors, their shares fell 1.3% on this announcement. Let me just tell you, this is a big deal. If General Motors can't make a diesel pass, who's been around? Well, Ford's been around. We haven't heard nothing from Ford yet, have we? Ford doesn't make that many diesels. I wonder if Ford's going to have the same problem. They're going to. I don't think anybody can make these cars pass their emission standards. They just can't. And to lie, cheat, and steal is one thing. But then when you get caught, lie, cheat, and cover up. And you're paying fines and you're still hiding. And they have certain guys, I told you last week, they have certain fellas in Germany that work for Volkswagen and Bosch that are already going to jail over cheating, well, millions of people. Millions. And apparently, they always say there's some good in all things. No, there's not. Not in this. There's no good here at all. First of all, you can't make it pass, so you cheat. You don't make it pass. When it doesn't pass, then you lie. And then when they finally catch you, you steal the day and you lie all about it some more. Cover it up. General Motors says they're pulling out of India, the India market, and they're going to sell their South Africa plant. Why? Why do you think? Diesels. All these companies, these countries, they love that diesel. There's a couple of reasons for that. The mileage is very good. There's not a lot of stations handy. It's not like you can go down to the corner and get fuel and a sandwich, which you can do in America, but you can't do in India or South Africa. The other thing is, diesel's cheaper there. It's easier to make. Diesel is almost like a heating oil. It's almost like a kerosene, which is a low refined version of petroleum gas, of gasoline. So it's a simpler process to make diesel. And that's what these countries don't have, the high tech, the refineries and things and the transportation and the pipelines. They don't have all that. But they can make diesel. Anybody can take oil and make diesel. Throw a few additives in there, shake it up, and call it diesel. Diesel doesn't run on spark. Diesel runs on compression. We'll get into that one of these days when I get on a soapbox about diesels. But here, why is General Motors bugging out? Well, General Motors says it's going to take a $500 million loss in the second quarter to restructure operations in India, Africa, and Singapore. It will cancel most of a planned $1 billion investment to build a new line of low-cost vehicles in India. That all run on diesel, trust me. General Motors has been investing about $600 a year, or $600 million a year, to develop autonomous vehicles and transportation services. Who cares? Those won't be diesels, I guarantee you. Diesels are going bye-bye. Simply because the tree huggers will not let it not go bye-bye. This is another story about GM selling the South Africa plant. They're selling it. About 1,500 people are going to lose jobs. The union down there, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, is pretty upset. But there's a lot of layoff notices going out. But they're selling it to Isuzu. And Isuzu will pick up the banner. I wonder... if nobody else can make a diesel that doesn't pollute, Isuzu can't either. So maybe they're making a deal with the government in Africa. Maybe the government in Africa says, we don't care. We can't afford to build refineries. We can't afford the technology. We can't afford the network of gas stations. You keep the diesels. Make sure it's got a big enough tank that they can go from point A to point B. And if it stinks a little bit, it stinks. What are you going to do? I'm telling you, the smaller, poorer, or less developed countries are polluting this world to death. Don't worry about what's going on in America. I mean, little bit here and there, we're nothing. We're nothing compared to the way they do things. If you ever fly over China, they tell me there's a haze that you can't imagine what it is. Nobody's got any idea. Same way with Mexico City. It's a haze. It's pollution. The smaller countries just don't have it. They don't have the refineries. They don't have the network. They don't have the pipeline. They don't have the trucks to move them around. This story just kills me. And I wrote this one out after reading it, and I just said, this, why? You know how I feel about autonomous driving, okay? I'm all for it as soon as It's been transferred and trained and sifted and grained, and it works correctly, and nobody gets killed doing it. Delphi Corporation. Self-driving taxis are bound for the U.S. And their plan to announce last year, but was shopping for partners. They didn't have any partners. Delphi didn't. They're most likely they're going to be Boston and Pittsburgh is where they're going to go. Delphi's U.S. initiative will be similar to the ride-hailing service that it launched in Singapore in that city. Delphi operates a single Audi SQ5 crossover guided by an array of LiDAR cameras and radar sensors. Well, I want to weigh on that a minute. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. But you know what? I know cars. That's all I know, to be honest with you. Don't ask me to change a wall socket. I just can't do it. But I can program your car's computer. That's just, I know cars. And I got to tell you, Delphi lost me 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Whenever Mary Barra took over for General Motors because they stuck it to her. Delphi is the company that brought you Ignition Gate. Those are the people that made those ignition switches that would not stay on and caused a lot of wrecks and a lot of deaths. Delphi is a killer. Delphi has killed people with their ignition switches. I mean, it's out there. The facts are the facts. I'm not making this up. And they hid it. They conspired with General Motors to hide the fact that their ignition switches were no god darn good. And they were falling out. People were losing control and losing power, and people got killed. But they don't know how many, because it's been going on since the late 90s, early 2000s. Minimum of 2003 was one of the first recorded deaths from this ignition switch problem, which they didn't even know about Ignition Gate in 2003. How many other people have been killed before and after that they didn't know about the ignition problem? Till it finally came out, 4 or 5 years ago? I'm telling you, I'm not getting in a taxi that has the word Delphi attached to it anywhere.